Have you ever wondered how the rapid advancement of technology affects our jobs and livelihoods? Indeed, technology is advancing at a breathtaking pace. It is like a runaway train hurtling down the tracks at breakneck speed, and it's reshaping every corner of our lives. From the way we communicate to how we shop, even down to our leisure activities, technology has its fingerprints on everything. But let us focus on one specific area, the job market. Technology has the power to create new jobs, but it also has the potential to make others obsolete. Automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are no longer concepts that belong in a sci-fi movie. They're here, and they are shaking up the job market in ways we are only just beginning to understand. We see self-checkout kiosks in supermarkets, robots in factories, and AI-powered customer service chatbots. These are all examples of technology replacing human labor. For some, this is a cause for concern. They worry about job losses, the devaluation of skills, and a future where machines rule the workplace. It is a complex issue, and there is no one-size-fits-all answer. But this is not the first time we have faced such a dilemma. In fact, if we turn back the pages of history, we find ourselves in the early 19th century, at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. This was a time of great change. The introduction of mechanized production methods transformed the textile industry, and with it, the lives of the workers. This period of upheaval gave birth to a movement of people who were deeply concerned about these changes. They were known as the Luddites. As we dive back into history, we reveal a similar situation during the Industrial Revolution, a time when a group known as the Luddites emerged. The Luddite movement was born in the early 19th century, a time of great change and upheaval. This period, known as the Industrial Revolution, brought about a dramatic transformation in the way goods were produced, particularly in the textile industry. Machines powered by steam and water were introduced to replace manual labor, leading to an escalation in production rates and a decrease in manufacturing costs. However, this was not a welcome change for everyone. For the skilled laborers who had spent years honing their craft, these machines represented a threat. They saw their livelihoods being undermined as their artisanal skills were devalued and replaced by mechanized production methods. Job losses were rampant and working conditions began to deteriorate. These laborers, who would later become known as the Luddites, were not opposed to progress or technology in and of itself. Their grievance lay with the fact that the benefits of this progress were not being equitably shared. The factory owners were reaping huge profits, while the laborers were left grappling with unemployment and poverty. Frustration and anger began to mount among these workers. They felt betrayed by a system that was supposed to improve their lives, but was instead leaving them destitute. Their concerns were not just about their immediate livelihood, but also about the future of their craft and their communities. The Luddites, named after their mythical leader Ned Ludd, began to protest in ways that would grab the attention of the nation. They refused to be silent spectators watching their way of life crumble. Instead, they stood up against the tide of change, ready to make their voices heard. Their fight was not just for their jobs, but for a fair and equitable society where the fruits of progress were shared by all. The Luddites, skilled laborers whose livelihoods were threatened, chose to fight back against the machines. Frustrated and fearful, they were determined to make their voices heard, to stand up for their rights, and to challenge the seemingly unstoppable march of industrialization. Their chosen method of protest was as direct as it was destructive. In a world where their skills were being devalued, their jobs threatened, and their working conditions worsened, the Luddites saw the machines as the embodiment of their hardships. So they took hammers to these looms, sledgehammers to spinning jennies. They smashed and shattered the engines of their perceived oppression. But it was not just about destruction. The Luddites also demanded fair wages, a recognition of their worth as skilled workers, and a chance to continue their livelihoods in the face of drastic economic change. Their protests were a plea for justice, a call for balance in a rapidly shifting world. And this was not a localized phenomenon. The Luddite movement swept across England like a storm, touching towns and cities from Nottingham to Yorkshire, from Lancashire to Leicestershire. The sound of hammer on metal echoed through the country, a resounding symbol of resistance against the tide of industrialization. Yet these were not mindless acts of violence. The Luddites were not opposed to technology or progress per se, but to the way it was being implemented without regard for their well-being. Their actions were a desperate attempt to regain control, to assert their place in a society that seemed to be leaving them behind. Their protests, however, were met with a strong and brutal response. The British government, in an attempt to control the situation, responded with harsh measures. The Luddite protests sent ripples of concern through the echelons of power. Not to be outdone by the rising tide of rebellion, the government retaliated swiftly and decisively. A significant move was the introduction of legislation that turned machine breaking into a capital offense. This was a stern message to the Luddites. Their acts of defiance were no longer just damaging property, but were now considered a crime punishable by death. The law was clear: break the machine, and you risk losing your life. However, the government's response did not stop at legislation. With the unrest growing, they decided to call in the big guns, quite literally. Military forces were deployed to the areas most affected by the Luddite protests. Soldiers patrolled the streets, their presence a constant reminder of the government's determination to quell the rebellion. And the measures did not stop there. Many Luddites, now marked as criminals, were hunted down. Arrests swept through the communities, and the courts quickly filled with those accused. The trials were often swift, with the outcome seldom in doubt. Many of those who had dared to stand against the march of the machines found themselves facing the ultimate punishment. Executions became a grim testament to the government's resolve. Yet, the government's harsh response was not the only factor that led to the decline of the Luddite movement. As the years passed, economic conditions began to improve. The same machines that had been the focus of so much anger and fear started to bring about a new era of prosperity. Jobs returned, though they were different from the ones that had been lost. By 1816, the Luddite movement had significantly diminished due to these crackdowns and improving economic conditions. The echoes of the Luddite rebellion, though, continue to resonate, reminding us of the tumultuous relationship between technology, labor, and society. Though the Luddite movement may have faded into history, its legacy lives on. Born out of the early 19th century's Industrial Revolution, it was a cry for fairness, a resistance against the devaluation of skilled labor and worsening work conditions. Today, it informs our understanding of the effects of technological advancement on jobs and livelihoods. The Luddites' fight was not against technology per se, but against the inconsiderate application of it, a fight for the dignity of work and the value of human labor. Their struggle echoes in contemporary debates about automation, artificial intelligence, and the future of work. We see the spirit of the Luddites in modern movements pushing for fair wages, decent work conditions, and the right to meaningful work. Their story serves as a reminder that progress should not come at the expense of people's livelihoods and well-being. As we navigate our own technological revolution, the lessons from the Luddites remind us of the importance of considering the human impact. In the realm of fiction, parallels can be drawn between the Luddite movement and a significant event in Frank Herbert's Dune series, the Butlerian Jihad. This fictional revolution saw humans rise up against the domination of thinking machines. The Butlerian Jihad, much like the Luddite movement, was not a rejection of all technology, but a rebellion against the devaluation of human skills, the loss of human freedom, and the threat to human survival posed by unchecked technological advancement. The methods used in both movements were drastic and violent. The Luddites smashed machines, while the Butlerian Jihad resulted in the complete annihilation of all advanced computing machines. The impacts of these movements were significant and long-lasting. The Luddite struggle helped shape modern labor movements and spark discussions about the human cost of progress, while the Butlerian Jihad led to a complete ban on certain types of technology in the Dune universe, reshaping its society and culture. Both the Luddite movement and the Butlerian Jihad serve as stark reminders of the potential consequences of unchecked technological advancement. They underscore the importance of maintaining a balance between progress and the preservation of human skills, freedom, and dignity. Whether in history or fiction, these movements remind us that technological advancement should be guided by ethical considerations and should serve to enhance, not undermine, human potential and well-being. So, what can we learn from the Luddites? The Luddite movement, born out of the Industrial Revolution, serves as a stark reminder of the tension that can arise from rapid technological advancement. These early 19th century protesters were not simply opposed to technology, but were fighting for the value of their skills and livelihoods, which were threatened by mechanized production. Their actions, drastic as they were, underscore the importance of considering the human element in the face of progress. They remind us that while innovation can bring about immense benefits, it can also create upheaval, displacing workers and devaluing their skills. The harsh response of the British government towards the Luddites' protests, however, tells us that suppressing dissent is not the solution. Instead, it is crucial to find a balance, to ensure that technological advancement is accompanied by measures that protect and support those who might be adversely affected. As we continue to advance technologically, may we always remember the lessons from the past and strive to ensure that no one is left behind in the march of progress. This video serves as a follow-up to our Destroy the Machines video. In that video, we have not emphasized enough the disruption automation causes to jobs and standards of living, which this video will address. While it eventually led to remarkable advancements in living standards and economic prosperity, the early stages of the Industrial Revolution were marked by significant disruptions and challenges that did lead to a decrease in jobs and living standards for many people. The introduction of machinery and new manufacturing processes often displaced traditional industries, such as handloom weaving, small-scale agriculture, and artisanal crafts, leading to widespread job displacements. Many skilled artisans, craftsmen, and workers found themselves replaced by machines or facing lower wages as demand shifted to factory-produced goods. This displacement resulted in unemployment and underemployment for many workers, contributing to economic uncertainty and social unrest. As industries centralized in urban areas, there was a massive influx of rural workers into cities seeking employment. This rapid urbanization led to overcrowded living conditions, poor sanitation, and inadequate housing. Factory workers often toiled for long hours in dangerous conditions, leading to low living standards and widespread poverty. The shift from small-scale production to large-scale factories increased the power of factory owners over workers. Factory owners prioritized profits over worker welfare, and this imbalance resulted in low wages, long hours, and unsafe and harsh working conditions. Machinery accidents, industrial accidents, and occupational illnesses were more than just uncommon. Additionally, the lack of labor regulations meant that workers had little recourse against exploitation. The poor working conditions during the Industrial Revolution had significant consequences for the health of workers and surrounding communities, particularly in densely industrialized areas. Industrial processes such as coal mining, iron smelting, and factory production emitted large quantities of pollutants into the air. Coal-fired factories and steam engines were major sources of air pollution, releasing sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, and other harmful chemicals into the atmosphere. This pollution resulted in smog, which often hung over industrial cities, obscuring sunlight and creating poor visibility. Workers in factories and mines were exposed to high levels of air pollution and airborne particles, leading to respiratory ailments such as bronchitis, asthma, and pneumoconiosis, such as coal workers' pneumoconiosis or black lung disease. Prolonged exposure to polluted air increased the risk of chronic respiratory conditions, which could significantly impact not only workers' health and productivity, but also the surrounding communities. Industrial processes also polluted water sources through the discharge of untreated waste and effluents. Factories often dumped toxic chemicals and industrial byproducts into rivers and streams, contaminating water supplies and posing health risks to both workers and communities downstream. Waterborne diseases such as cholera and typhoid were common in areas with poor sanitation and polluted water sources. Lead was commonly used in industrial processes such as lead smelting, pottery glazing, and paint manufacturing. Workers exposed to lead dust and fumes faced the risk of lead poisoning, which could cause neurological damage, developmental disorders, and other serious health problems. Lead contamination also affected surrounding soil and water, posing risks to public health. The effects of industrial pollution extended beyond factory workers to impact entire communities living near industrial sites. Residents in industrial areas faced increased rates of respiratory diseases, waterborne illnesses, and other health problems associated with pollution exposure. Children and the elderly were particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of polluted air and water. The adoption of new machinery and production methods led to a decrease in the demand for certain types of labor, particularly those that could be easily automated. This resulted in unemployment and underemployment for many workers who lacked the skills to adapt to the changing economy. The rapid pace of industrialization disrupted traditional social structures and communities. Families were separated as individuals migrated to urban centers in search of work, and the loss of traditional ways of life contributed to social unrest and dislocation. Overall, the poor working conditions and environmental pollution associated with early industrialization had far-reaching consequences for public health, contributing to high rates of morbidity and mortality among workers and communities exposed to industrial pollution. Under these harsh conditions, it is no wonder why certain factory workers revolted, and the Luddite movement emerged. Technological unemployment and underemployment, harsh and unsafe working conditions, lower wages and living standards, and poorer health conditions due to air pollution, water pollution, and lead poisoning were all causes of the Luddite movement. To quell the Luddite movement, the British government deployed police and military forces. Harsh laws and punishments were implemented. Despite the crackdowns, the Luddite movement persisted, highlighting the depth of discontent and the severity of challenges the workers, their families, and their communities faced. It was not until later in the Industrial Revolution that governments began to implement regulations and reforms aimed at improving working conditions and reducing environmental pollution. Overall, the Luddite movement was a response to the social and economic upheaval brought about by the Industrial Revolution. While the movement ultimately failed to halt the tide of industrialization, it served as a poignant reminder of the human cost of technological progress and the need for greater consideration of workers' rights and welfare in the face of rapid technological and economic change. Overall, the Industrial Revolution eventually led to significant improvements in living standards and job opportunities. However, its early stages were characterized by disruption, displacement, and hardship for many people. It took several decades for societies to adapt to the new economic realities and for governments to implement reforms aimed at addressing the social and economic challenges posed by industrialization. Looking ahead, a lot of parallels can be made between the Industrial Revolution and the upcoming artificial intelligence revolution, as addressed in a few of our earlier videos. As experienced during the early stages of the Industrial Revolution, the early stages of the AI revolution will undoubtedly lead to job losses and replacement, lower wages, and lower living standards. Low-paying menial jobs that require dexterity will remain, because making a dexterous robot for now is cost-prohibitive. What is uncertain is what skilled jobs will emerge during the AI revolution. Will these jobs be higher paying and lead to higher living standards? What is certain is that there will be a period of social and economic turmoil. Will we see an upheaval against artificial intelligence, similar to the Luddite movement? Will it be like the Butlerian Jihad from Frank Herbert's Dune books? Yet, there is hope that as artificial intelligence advances and gets ever more smarter, it will recognize and value of human contribution and cooperation. Currently, AI would be vulnerable to massive solar flares hitting the Earth, such as the Carrington event that occurred in 1859. As FYI, we do have an upcoming video on the Carrington event. In conclusion, it is imperative to prioritize human welfare and societal well-being as we embark on this new era of technological innovation.
Have you ever considered what could happen if the sun decided to throw a tantrum? Now, this isn't just a flight of fancy, but a real, scientifically documented phenomenon known as solar storms. Imagine the sun, our familiar life-giving star, suddenly erupting with an energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. That's a solar storm for you. These storms are born from the sun's 11-year solar cycle, during which its magnetic field undergoes dramatic changes. The result? Potentially catastrophic coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. These eruptions can cause geomagnetic storms on Earth, disrupting our planet's magnetic field. Now picture this. Auroras, those breathtaking light displays usually seen near the poles, visible as far south as the Caribbean and Mexico. Compasses going haywire at sea, telegraph networks, the communication backbone of the time, completely damaged. Sounds like a scene straight from a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? But this is not a work of fiction. This has happened before. One of the most significant of these solar tantrums was the Carrington event in 1859. The Carrington event, named after British astronomer Richard Carrington, began with a seemingly innocuous observation. On a typical day in September 1859, Carrington noticed a bright flash of light on the sun's surface. Little did he know, this was no ordinary solar activity. In fact, this solar flare was about to release the energy of 10 billion atomic bombs into the cosmos. The effects of this extraordinary solar storm were felt almost immediately here on Earth. It was as if our planet was wrapped in a cosmic light show. Auroras, typically confined to the polar regions, painted the skies as far south as the Caribbean and Mexico. Imagine a night sky in the tropics lit up with the swirling colors of the northern lights. It must have been a sight to behold. But the spectacle in the sky was not the only evidence of this cosmic event. Even the most steadfast navigators were sent into a frenzy as their compasses spun wildly, thrown off by the geomagnetic storm. This disruption at sea was just the beginning of a series of unprecedented global impacts. Yet, amidst the beautiful chaos in the heavens and the disarray on the seas, little did people realize that the most significant effects of this solar storm were still to come. The world was about to experience a technological disturbance like never before, one that would underscore our vulnerability to the whims of our nearby star, but the most remarkable impact was yet to come. As the solar storm reached its peak, the effects were felt around the globe. The telegraph system, the lifeline of communication in those days, was severely disrupted. Telegraph lines were rendered inoperable, and powerful currents surged through the wires, causing sparks and even setting some offices on fire. The disruption was so extensive that the telegraph operators were left flabbergasted. But amidst this chaos, an intriguing discovery was made. Telegraph operators found that they could transmit messages not through the usual power lines but using only the auroral current. This was an unexpected revelation, a silver lining in the midst of a global disturbance. The disruption, however, was not limited to telegraph lines. Compasses at sea were thrown off, creating navigation challenges for mariners. The world seemed to have gone awry, a victim to the whims of the sun. And then there were the auroras. The sky was ablaze with an ethereal light show, the likes of which had never been seen before. Vivid accounts of this celestial spectacle filled the telegraph messages when the systems came back online. These accounts spoke of skies painted with brilliant hues, from the Caribbean to as far north as Mexico. The nighttime skies were illuminated with a surreal glow, turning night into day. The Carrington event was not just an astronomical phenomenon, it was an event that shook the world, an event that highlighted our vulnerability to the forces of nature. The world had experienced a solar storm of unprecedented scale, a storm that had the power to disrupt our lives and our technology. In the aftermath, it became clear that the Carrington event was the largest solar storm in the last 500 years. It served as a stark reminder of the potential havoc that a solar storm can wreak on our technological civilization. It underscored the fact that we, despite all our advancements, are still at the mercy of the celestial bodies that surround us. So, what would happen if a Carrington-class event were to occur today? Well, let us paint a picture. Imagine a world where our communication systems falter, power grids plunge into darkness, and satellites spin out of control. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie, but a potential reality if a solar storm of the magnitude of the Carrington event were to strike us today. With our society heavily reliant on technology, such an occurrence could lead to widespread social and economic disruptions. The estimated cost? Brace yourselves. We are talking about a staggering amount in the trillions of dollars. Yes, you heard it right, trillions. This is not just about losing your Wi-Fi signal or not being able to charge your phone. It is about a complete breakdown of infrastructure from transportation to healthcare services that we take for granted in our daily lives. Now you might be thinking, can't we predict these solar storms and prepare ourselves? The truth is, predicting space weather is as complex as it sounds. Sure, we have made significant strides in understanding our sun and its cycles. We monitor sunspot activity, which can give us clues about the likelihood of solar flares. But despite our best efforts, predicting the exact timing and magnitude of these solar storms remains a formidable challenge. However, rest assured, the scientific community is not sitting idle. Teams of dedicated scientists are tirelessly working to refine our predictive capabilities. Organizations like NASA and the European Space Agency have spacecraft committed to studying the sun and its influence on the solar system. Their invaluable work helps us better understand these solar phenomena and hopefully prepare for them. As we look to the future, it is important to remember that our modern technological civilization is more vulnerable than ever. The advent of another Carrington event is not just a possibility, it is a question of when, not if. And when that day comes, the impact could be, for lack of a better word, catastrophic. With our modern technological civilization so dependent on electronics, the impact of another Carrington event could be catastrophic. The likelihood of another Carrington event is uncertain, but the potential is always there. Solar storms of such magnitude occur approximately once every 500 years. Yet, storms with half the intensity of the Carrington event occur every 50 years. These less intense storms still have the power to disrupt our modern technological society, albeit on a smaller scale. Our understanding of solar storms is continually evolving, thanks to the tireless efforts of researchers around the world. Scientists are persistently monitoring sunspot activity, a key indicator of potential solar flares and coronal mass ejections. Agencies like NASA and the European Space Agency have spacecraft dedicated to studying the sun, its tumultuous activities, and its influence on our solar system. Despite these efforts, predicting space weather remains a formidable challenge. The sun, in all its fiery glory, keeps its secrets well guarded. The future of solar storms, therefore, remains uncertain. So, the next time you look up at the sun, consider this. What if it decided to throw another tantrum? In conclusion, the Carrington event serves as a stark reminder of our vulnerability to the forces of nature. As we have explored, this 19th century solar storm caused widespread disruption across the globe, affecting telegraph systems and even igniting fires. Imagine, then, the potential catastrophic effects of a similar event in today's technologically dependent society. Our reliance on technology has greatly increased since the Carrington event, and a solar storm of the same magnitude could wreak havoc on our modern infrastructure, potentially causing trillions of dollars in damages and disrupting our way of life. However, it is not all doom and gloom. The global scientific community is actively working to better understand and predict these solar storms. The ongoing research and monitoring of our sun are crucial in preparing for a potential future solar storm. These efforts are our best defense against the unpredictable and powerful force of the sun. As we continue to explore the cosmos, let us not forget the power of the star that makes life on Earth possible. The sun, in all its fiery glory, is both a giver and taker of life. It is the ultimate paradox. Its warm rays provide the energy we need to survive, yet its temper tantrums have the potential to disrupt our civilization. The future of solar storms may be uncertain, but our resilience and thirst for knowledge will equip us to face any challenges that come our way. So, the next time you gaze at the sun, remember its power and our perpetual quest to understand it.
Ever pondered the ecological implications in a sci-fi novel? Well, Dune by Frank Herbert certainly offers food for thought. Now picture this, a desert planet, Arrakis, the setting for Dune. This barren, arid world might seem like an unlikely place for an ecological discussion, yet it holds profound environmental significance. Sand dunes as far as the eye can see, and a scarcity of water so intense it becomes a pivotal resource. Not just a backdrop for the story, but a key player, influencing the lives of the characters and the unfolding drama. But that is not all. Herbert's depiction of Arrakis is far from a simple imaginative feat. It is a reflection of his foresight, a visionary understanding of environmental concerns that resonate even today. His exploration of the consequences of ecological change, the struggle for resources, and the delicate balance of nature was groundbreaking at the time. This environmental focus did more than just add depth to the narrative. It sparked a wave, impacting both the genre of science fiction and the broader environmental movement. Dune, with its stark desert world and its ecological underpinnings, challenged readers to think about the environment in a new light. It encouraged them to consider the interplay between nature and society, and the potential repercussions of our actions on the natural world. Herbert's environmental foresight also extended to his anticipation of future power struggles and technological advancements. In Dune, control of Arrakis and its precious resource, the spice melange, is a central conflict, mirroring our real-world struggles over resources like oil and water. And so, Dune goes beyond the realms of typical science fiction. It is not just about futuristic technology or alien societies. It's a novel that delves into the heart of our relationship with the environment, presenting a world where ecological balance is not just desirable, but essential for survival. So you see, Dune is not just a tale of adventures and power struggles, but a tale of the environment and how we interact with it. Now, Dune does not just stop at the environment, it goes beyond, intertwining religion, geopolitics, and the ecology. The book presents a whole new world, where religion and politics are deeply rooted in the ecology of the desert planet, Arrakis. The inhabitants, the freemen, have a religion that venerates the harsh desert and its giant sandworms. These beliefs influence their political decisions and their relationship with their environment. Herbert also delves into geopolitical struggles, illustrating how the planet's unique resource, the spice melange, creates power dynamics between the noble houses of the Landsraad, particularly those of the houses of Atreides, Harkonnen, and Corrino. These struggles for control and dominance have profound implications on Arrakis's ecology, leading to drastic ecological changes. In Dune, Herbert highlights how the consequences of these changes are not just environmental, but societal too. He shows us that when the ecology of a place changes, so does its culture, its politics, and its religion. In Dune, the environment is not just a backdrop, it is a character, influencing and being influenced by the other elements of the story. Frank Herbert was more than just a writer, he was an environmental activist, and his passion is reflected in Dune. Herbert was a man who cared deeply for the environment, a trait that shines brightly in his work. His concern for the ecology was not just limited to the confines of his novels, but it extended into his personal life as well. He was inspired by his observations of sand dune stabilization efforts in Florence, Oregon, a process that involved the taming and shaping of these ever-shifting landscapes. This fascination was clearly mirrored in the environment of Arrakis, the desert planet that sits at the heart of Dune's narrative. But Herbert's environmental activism did not stop at observation. He was an advocate for renewable energy, a pioneer in his thinking. He believed in harnessing the power of nature for sustainable use, a concept that was far ahead of its time. This belief is mirrored in the world of Arrakis, where the inhabitants have learned to live in harmony with their harsh environment, using its resources wisely and respectfully. However, like any visionary, Herbert was not without his critics. Modern environmentalists, advocating for the preservation of natural ecosystems, have critiqued his vision of managing resource extraction. They argue that his approach is more about controlling and exploiting nature rather than preserving and coexisting with it. They see a discrepancy between his real-world advocacy and the ecological practices in his novels. Nevertheless, these critiques do not diminish the impact of Herbert's work. His vision has sparked conversations about environmentalism, resource management, and the human relationship with nature. It is a discussion that continues to this day, more than half a century after Dune was first published. Herbert's Dune is a testament to the power of sci-fi in addressing real-world issues like ecology. It is more than a novel, it is a call to action.
Ever pondered how the Mongol Empire, known for its warfare, could be responsible for some groundbreaking innovations? Well, let's unravel this together. The Mongol Empire emerged in the 13th century, a period marked by aggressive expansion and conquests. From the steppes of Mongolia, they launched campaigns that would reshape the world, reaching as far as Europe and the Middle East. But there is more to their story than just brute force and devastation. The Mongols had a keen eye for governance, commerce, and technology. Yes, you heard it right. This empire, often depicted as a horde of ruthless warriors, was also a cradle of innovation. Their rule, as harsh as it was, had a silver lining. They actively sought to revive commerce across their vast territories. Imagine the Silk Road bustling with traders, exchanging not just goods but ideas, cultures, and technologies. That was the Mongol Empire for you. But how did they foster such an environment? The answer lies in their approach to governance. The Mongols were smart. They knew the value of skilled individuals. So instead of annihilating them, they recruited them. From architects to astronomers, from scholars to engineers, they gathered a wide array of talents under their rule. In addition, they established research centers. Now, these were not like our modern-day universities, but they served a similar purpose. It was a space for knowledge exchange, a platform for innovation. And it did not stop there. The Mongols were open to new technologies. They introduced gunpowder to warfare, revolutionizing how battles were fought. They experimented with paper money, a novelty at the time, which would later shape our financial systems. So the Mongols were not just conquerors, but innovators too. Intriguing, isn't it?
Unless you are the Mongols.
Ever used a paper bill and wondered where it originated? Well, surprise, surprise, it's the Mongols. The Mongols, known for their aggressive expansion and conquests, were also pioneers in the world of trade and currency. And here is how they revolutionized it. The Mongols were big on the idea of free trade. They believed in the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture without the hindrance of tariffs or trade barriers. They established wide trade networks, spanning from the Far East to the Far West. This approach not only helped in the exchange of commodities, but also fostered a sense of unity and shared culture. The Silk Roads bustled with activity, with merchants and traders from all corners of the earth exchanging goods, ideas, and stories. But what really set the Mongols apart was their experimentation with paper money. Now, paper money may seem like a given to us today, but back in the 13th century, it was a groundbreaking innovation. The Mongols realized the impracticality of carrying heavy coins for long-distance trade. Their solution? Paper money, light, easy to carry, and backed by precious metals. This was a game-changer. It made trade more efficient and helped in the expansion of their empire. Through these innovations, the Mongols had a profound impact on the global economy. They set the stage for the modern financial systems that we take for granted today. Their influence can be seen in the way we trade goods, in the currencies we use, and in the economic policies we follow. So next time you pull out a paper bill, remember the Mongols. They were the ones who started it all. Did you know that the Mongols were the first to use gunpowder in warfare? Yes, indeed. The Mongols, known for their aggressive expansion and conquests, were also pioneers in military technology. The Mongols introduced gunpowder to the battlefield, marking a significant turning point in warfare. This was a radical innovation because gunpowder, unlike traditional weapons, could cause massive destruction from a distance. Think of it as the 13th century version of a long-range missile. This technological advantage gave the Mongols a significant edge over their adversaries, enabling them to conquer vast territories. But the Mongols' military innovations were not limited to weaponry. They also had a profound influence on military strategies. Their opponents were often left in awe of their advanced organizational tactics. The Mongols were experts in mobility, coordination, and communication on the battlefield. Their use of complex signaling systems and their ability to swiftly adapt to changing circumstances were truly remarkable. These strategies were so effective that they were adopted by other civilizations, spreading across the East and West. Moreover, the Mongols were not just warriors, they were also scholars. They established research centers to study and develop new technologies and strategies. They encouraged innovation, fostering an environment where ideas could flourish. This culture of learning and experimentation was crucial to the Mongols' military success. The Mongols' approach to warfare was both ruthless and revolutionary. They were not afraid to embrace new technologies and tactics, and their willingness to learn and adapt was a key factor in their dominance. So, the Mongols did not just rule with an iron fist, they brought groundbreaking changes to warfare. Who would have thought, right? But not all the effects of the Mongol Empire were positive. Their vast trade networks, while revolutionary, also had a darker side. You see, these intricate systems of trade routes facilitated the free flow of people, animals, and goods across vast distances. This meant that not only goods and ideas were exchanged but also diseases. Yes, you heard right. The Mongols inadvertently played a significant role in spreading diseases, including the most devastating one in history, the Black Death. As traders and armies moved along the Silk Road, they carried with them not just silk and spices, but also fleas and rats. These tiny creatures were the carriers of the deadly bacterium Yersinia pestis, the cause of the plague. The Black Death, as it came to be known, swept across Eurasia in the 14th century, wiping out an estimated 75 to 200 million people. That is approximately 30 to 60% of Europe's total population at the time. This pandemic had a profound impact on the world, reshaping societies and economies. The loss of life was so immense that it took several centuries for the population to recover. So, while the Mongols brought many innovations, they also unintentionally spread devastation. History indeed is full of surprises. Our journey through the Mongol Empire has been one of surprises. As we have seen, the Mongol Empire was more than just a force of destruction. They were pioneers in many ways, revolutionizing trade and currency, shaping military technologies and strategies, and even inadvertently accelerating the spread of diseases. Let us take a moment to reflect on these innovations. The Mongols created an extensive trade network that spanned continents, introducing a unified currency system that facilitated trade and economic growth. Their military strategies were so advanced that they are still studied in military academies today. But their influence was not all positive. Their trade networks also served as conduits for the spread of diseases, most notably the Black Death, a pandemic that decimated populations across Eurasia. This duality in their influence, both positive and negative, is what makes their legacy so fascinating. On one hand, they were known for their brutal conquests. On the other, they were innovators who, in their own way, helped to shape the world as we know it. So, the next time you think of the Mongols, remember, they were not just conquerors but innovators who left a lasting impact on the world. Their empire may have fallen, but their influence persists, echoing through the annals of history. Yes, the Mongols were much more than the barbarians history often portrays them as. They were a civilization that, in their own unique way, contributed significantly to the tapestry of human history.
Have you ever wondered what goods were traded along the Silk Road and why? Let's step back in time, shall we? Picture this. Central Eurasia, a vast stretch of land teeming with diverse cultures, traditions, and languages. Now, imagine a network of trade routes sprouting from this massive landmass, connecting its varied regions like a complex web. This, my friends, is the inception of the Silk Road. In 1877, Ferdinand Freiherr von Richthofen, a German geographer, coined the term Silk Road. He focused on the flourishing silk trade between the Chinese Han Empire from 206 BC to 220 AD and Rome. But modern scholars recognize that the Silk Road, or Silk Roads, continued to enable cross-continental trade, until large-scale maritime trade replaced overland caravans in the 17th and 18th centuries. But the Silk Road was more than just a simple trail for traders. It was a vibrant and bustling trade network that spanned centuries, shaping the course of history and the world as we know it. And it was not just one single straight path. Oh no, it was a maze of routes, each one teeming with life and stories of its own. Now, what made the Silk Road so significant? Well, it was not just about the exchange of goods, although that was a big part of it. Yes, there were silk, horses, paper, spices, jade, and fur, and yes, they were traded extensively. But the Silk Road was also about the exchange of knowledge and culture. It was a conduit for ideas, innovations, and philosophies, a highway where East met West, and new concepts and inventions were born. As traders traversed these routes, they did not just carry goods. They carried stories, beliefs, and wisdom. They brought with them the teachings of their lands, their ways of life, their technologies, and their religions. They shared these with the people they met along the way, and in turn, absorbed new insights and perspectives. And so, the Silk Road served as a grand stage for cultural exchange, facilitating the spread of religions and ideas through the transmission of texts and books. But it was not just about the enlightened exchange of knowledge. There were also darker aspects of Silk Road trade, like slavery. So you see, the Silk Road was more than just a trade route. It was a highway of ideas and innovations. It was a testament to the interconnectedness of our world, a symbol of unity amidst diversity, and a beacon of cultural exchange. But as we'll see in the next scenes, the Silk Road was also a mirror reflecting the darker aspects of human nature and the relentless march of progress. So, what exactly was traded along these ancient routes? Well, the Silk Road was like a grand bazaar, teeming with a myriad of goods. At the heart of it all was, of course, silk, the coveted fabric that gave the Silk Road its name. Silk was first produced in China as early as 3000 BC. It was highly sought after for its beauty and luxury, and it found its way into the wardrobes of the elite across continents. Rome effectively sent tons of gold to China to buy the product. Because of limited carrying capacity on caravans, silk was an ideal trade item, because of its high value and light weight. But the Silk Road was not a one-trick pony. It also served as a conduit for the trade of horses. Sturdy and swift, these horses, especially those from Central Asia, were prized assets, essential for warfare and transportation. Then there was paper, another ingenious invention from China. At first, paper making was a closely guarded secret. Eventually, the art of papermaking spread across the Silk Road, revolutionizing communication and record-keeping. Text and paper bound into books was able to convey a myriad of thoughts and ideas. This enabled the spread of technology, culture, ideas, and religions. Spices, too, were a hot commodity, pun entirely intended. Exotic and aromatic, spices from India like black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg were traded extensively, adding a dash of flavor to cuisines around the world. Spices were mainly transported along the ancient maritime routes of the Silk Road. Jade, a valuable crystalline green gemstone, was also traded. It is a symbol of purity and nobility in Chinese culture. Fur, a necessity for the cold Eurasian winters, made their way across the trade routes as well. Porcelain from China was first traded with its neighbors, but soon was also prized by Europeans. Tea was first traded within East Asia. It was then first introduced to Western priests and merchants in China during the 16th century. Moving further along, we find bronze products, the epitome of Chinese craftsmanship. These items were not only practical but also represented the sophistication of the East. From India we had fabrics, their vibrant colors and intricate designs reflecting the country's rich cultural tapestry. China imported few products from Europe. Glassware was one of those few products. Roman glassware was among the prized possessions of the Asian elite. Sheep was largely unknown in China. Thus, woolen products such as clothes, carpets, curtains, blankets, and rugs was another of those few items imported into China. Sadly, so was the trade of slaves, part of the Silk Road, a tragic testament to the darker aspects of human history. These goods were not just merchandise, they were the seeds of cultural exchange. Each item carried with it a piece of its origin, a story, a tradition, or a technique, ready to be planted in new soil, ready to grow and intertwine with the local culture. And that, my friends, is the true beauty of the Silk Road trade. But the Silk Road was not just about trading goods, it was also about trading ideas. This network of ancient trade routes was a significant highway, not just for commodities, but also for the spread of knowledge, beliefs, technologies, and even diseases. Imagine, if you will, a time when paper was a novelty, a new technology that was as revolutionary then as the internet is to us today. The Silk Road played a key role in the spread of papermaking from China, where it was invented, to the rest of the world. This seemingly simple material transformed societies, enabling the recording and dissemination of ideas like never before. Glassmaking, another significant technology, also found its way across cultures and continents via the Silk Road. Originating in the Middle East, the art of glassmaking spread to China and beyond, influencing art, architecture, and daily life in profound ways. But it was not just tangible goods and technologies that traveled these routes. The Silk Road was also instrumental in the spread of religions and philosophical ideas. Buddhism, for instance, originated in India, but found eager adherents in China, Korea, Japan, and other parts of East Asia, largely thanks to the Silk Road. The exchange of religious texts and the travel of monks along these routes helped spread the teachings of the Buddha far and wide. This exchange was not one-sided. Ideas flowed in both directions along the Silk Road. For instance, Chinese concepts of governance, philosophy, and art also influenced societies in Central Asia and the Middle East. The Silk Road, then, was more than a trade route. It was a conduit for the spread of knowledge and ideas, a bridge that connected diverse cultures and helped shape them in turn. As much as it was about silk, spices, and other commodities, it was about the exchange of thoughts, beliefs, and technologies. The Silk Road was a conduit for knowledge, shaping civilizations far and wide. However, the Silk Road had its dark side too. As much as it was a beacon of cultural exchange and trade, the Silk Road also bore witness to some of the darkest aspects of human history. One such aspect was the trade in human lives. Yes, slavery. As goods, knowledge, and cultures traversed this vast network, so did the tragic exchange of human beings, sold into servitude and despair. Yet the darkness of the Silk Road did not stop at the trading of lives. It also served as a conduit for the transmission of disease. The same routes that carried silk, spices, and ideas also carried something far more sinister: the Black Death. This devastating pandemic, which claimed millions of lives across Europe and Asia, was believed to have been spread along the Silk Road, carried by fleas on rats that stowed away on merchant caravans. So, while the Silk Road played an undeniable role in shaping the world as we know it today, it is also important to remember the suffering it facilitated. The Silk Road was a double-edged sword. It brought prosperity and cultural exchange, but it also brought pain, suffering, and tragedy. It is a chilling reminder of how interconnected our world truly is. The same roots that can bring us together can also spread devastation. The Silk Road was not just a path of prosperity, but also a path of pain and suffering. All good things come to an end, and so did the Silk Road. For centuries, the Silk Road was the superhighway of its time, a bustling network of trade routes connecting east and west. But as the old saying goes, change is the only constant. In the 17th and 18th centuries, a new player entered the global commerce game: maritime trade. The advent of sea routes offered a more direct and, in many ways, safer alternative to the overland journey of the Silk Road. These maritime routes could handle larger volumes of goods and were less subject to the political unrest and banditry that often plagued the Silk Road. Moreover, the discovery of new sea passages, such as the Cape of Good Hope and the Americas, opened up fresh opportunities for trade and exploration that the Silk Road could not provide. As a result, the Silk Road began to lose its significance, its once thriving caravans and bustling markets slowly dwindling. But even as its physical presence faded, the Silk Road's impact did not. Despite its decline, the legacy of the Silk Road is far from forgotten. It lives on, not just as a symbol of trade, but as a testament to the extraordinary cultural exchange and historical significance it once held. It was a place where ideas, religions, technologies, and even diseases were exchanged, shaping the world as we know it today. The Silk Road may have faded into history, but its impact continues to echo through the ages.
Have you ever wondered how the United States, a young nation in the late 18th century, became an industrial powerhouse in just a few decades? Let's rewind back to the late 1700s. Picture a fledgling United States, fresh from the throes of revolution and largely agrarian in nature. Fields of cotton, tobacco, and grain stretched as far as the eye could see, and the majority of the populace engaged in farming. The concept of large-scale manufacturing was still quite alien to this nascent nation. Now, across the Atlantic, a different story was unfolding. England, the cradle of the Industrial Revolution, was a hotbed of technological advancements. Steam-powered engines were transforming the face of manufacturing, and textile mills were springing up like mushrooms after a spring rain. The power loom, a remarkable invention, allowed for the production of textiles on a scale previously unimaginable. The disparity between these two nations, one a beacon of industry, the other still steeped in agrarian simplicity, was stark and undeniable. The United States, however, was not content to remain in the shadow of its former colonial ruler. It recognized the potential of these advancements and yearned to replicate them on its own soil. But how could this young nation, with its minimal manufacturing capabilities, hope to catch up with the industrial behemoth that was England? Well, as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention, or in this case, the mother of replication. You see, the United States had a secret weapon up its sleeve, a strategy not quite legal yet incredibly effective. Rather than reinventing the wheel, the United States decided to borrow it from England. This borrowing wasn't a polite request and a gracious handover, though. In fact, it was a bold and daring act of what we now call intellectual piracy. The United States, in a bid to catch up with England's industrial prowess, resorted to smuggling technology and knowledge from across the pond. Let us introduce some of the key players in this audacious game. Francis Cabot Lowell, a Boston merchant and businessman, was one of them. As the War of 1812 was raging on, he toured English textile mills, gaining insights and knowledge about their latest technology. Lowell set sail from Great Britain in possession of the enemy's most precious commercial secret. He carried with him pirated plans for Edmund Cartwright's power loom, which had made Great Britain the world's leading industrial power. Halfway across the Atlantic, a British frigate intercepted Lowell's ship. Although the British double-searched his luggage and detained him for days, Lowell knew they would never find any evidence of espionage, for he had hidden the plans in the one place they would never find them, inside his photographic mind. Unable to find any sign of espionage, the British allowed Lowell to return to Boston. Lowell, using his sharp memory and keen eye, managed to replicate the designs of Cartwright's power loom back in America. His actions led to a significant boost in the American textile industry and helped propel the Industrial Revolution in the United States. Then there was Thomas Atwood Diggs, an American diplomat turned spy. Diggs was responsible for smuggling not only plans and models, but also skilled artisans and workers from England. In order to protect its economic supremacy, the British government banned the export of textile machinery and the immigration of workers who operated them. Diggs' actions were instrumental in replicating English manufacturing techniques in America. But perhaps the most significant figure in this narrative was Samuel Slater. Known as the father of American manufacturers, Slater was an Englishman who emigrated to America. Once there, he established the country's first water-powered textile mill, drawing upon his knowledge of English manufacturing techniques. Despite being dubbed Slater the Traitor by the British, he became a celebrated figure in his adopted home. These men, through their daring and resourceful actions, played pivotal roles in the American Industrial Revolution. They smuggled blueprints, replicated machines, and even imported skilled workers. Their actions were not without controversy and criticism, of course. The British were understandably upset, labeling these men as traitors and thieves. But on the other side of the Atlantic, perspective differed. These men were not seen as villains. They were hailed as heroes. Their actions were not only condoned, but actively encouraged by the American government. While England cried foul and dubbed them traitors, these men were hailed as heroes in the United States. Their efforts led to a surge in America's manufacturing base, propelling the country into becoming a leading industrial power. While intellectual piracy might not sound like a noble endeavor, its impact on the U.S. was undeniably transformative. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the United States was a fledgling nation, rich in resources but lagging in technological advancements. Intellectual piracy played a pivotal role in closing this gap. As the country absorbed and replicated the manufacturing secrets of Europe, particularly those of Britain, it experienced a surge in manufacturing capabilities. Under the Patent Act of 1793, the United States granted dubious patents to Americans who had pirated technology from other countries. At the same time, it barred foreign inventors from receiving patents. Thus, America became, by national policy and legislative act, the world's premier legal sanctuary for industrial pirates. These bold moves were not without criticism, yet the benefits were tangible. The U.S. began to realize its potential as an industrial powerhouse. The pace of manufacturing growth was like nothing the country had seen before. The landscape began to change, with factories springing up across the nation, churning out goods at an unprecedented rate. A key figure in this transformative period was Samuel Slater, often referred to as the father of American manufacturers. Slater, an immigrant from England, brought with him the knowledge and expertise of British manufacturing. He established the country's first water-powered textile mill, a significant milestone in the American Industrial Revolution. The impact of this single mill was far-reaching. It sparked the growth of the textile industry, which became a cornerstone of the American economy. The mill not only produced textiles but also demonstrated the potential of water power in manufacturing. It inspired other entrepreneurs to follow suit, leading to a proliferation of water-powered mills across the country. The story of intellectual piracy in the United States is a testament to the transformative power of knowledge and innovation. It is a story of how a young nation, through a combination of audacity and industry, managed to catch up with the well-established powers of Europe. The United States, once an agrarian nation, had successfully pirated its way to industrial prosperity. Let's take a moment to reflect on the conclusion of our intellectual piracy journey before we delve into its enduring legacy. As we trace the footsteps of the American textile industry from its infancy, we see a nation transformed. A nation that, once dependent on agrarian pursuits, became a beacon of industrial prowess. This metamorphosis was not a natural progression but a calculated move. A move that involved, dare we say, a bit of borrowing and tweaking. A visual representation of this growth is truly awe-inspiring. Picture a timeline, if you will. On one end, we see the humble beginnings, the first water-powered textile mill, a symbol of hope and potential. As we move along this timeline, we see the proliferation of mills across the country, each a testament to the power of borrowed knowledge and innovation. And finally, we arrive at the present day, where the fruits of this daring endeavor are visible in every corner of the United States. Our closing shot is a modern textile factory, a symbol of the legacy of the Industrial Revolution, a legacy that was built on the audacious act of intellectual piracy. As we transition into the next segment, let us remember that the legacy of intellectual piracy is not just about the past. It is a story that continues to shape the future of the United States. The success of intellectual piracy set a precedent that would shape the future of American industry. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the U.S. government did not just turn a blind eye to intellectual piracy, it actively encouraged it. The goal? To bolster the country's nascent manufacturing base. This sly strategy was more than just a short-term game. It laid the foundation for America's future industrial growth and innovation. By borrowing technology and intellectual property from Europe, the United States was able to jumpstart its own industrial revolution. And the rest, as they say, is history. But here is where it gets interesting. Today, the United States is a staunch defender of intellectual property rights. It is kind of ironic, isn't it? The very nation that once championed intellectual piracy now stands at the forefront of protecting intellectual property. So the next time you marvel at the United States industrial might, remember, it all started with a bit of borrowed knowledge.
Thank you for watching. Hope you found this video informative and entertaining. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. We do like to know and hear your feedback. And if you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get early access to our videos, and where we post bonus material. Till next time, this is Geeky Tidbits saying cheers and have a good day.